When Caroline Leavitt sat down for the interview, she expected a debate. What she didn't anticipate was a moment so explosive, it would bring down one of the most well-known TV hosts overnight. And this didn't happen in some pre-recorded segment where producers could step in, cut things out, or smooth over rough edges. No, this was raw, unfiltered, and unfolding live in real time. Caroline had been invited onto the Morning Current, a political talk show infamous for its fiery debates and even fiercer hosts. Sitting across from her was Paul Danning, a veteran journalist known for pushing buttons. His interviews? Aggressive. His style? Relentless. He wasn't just there to moderate, he was there to win. And today, his challenger was a rising conservative voice who wasn't about to back down. The segment started as expected. Paul came at Caroline, pressing her on media bias, accusing conservative outlets of spreading misinformation, while insisting that networks like his were simply setting the record straight. She didn't flinch. Instead, she fired back with facts, highlighting moments where mainstream media had twisted narratives, left out critical details, or outright misled the public. The discussion was intense, but professional for a moment. Then something shifted. Paul leaned in, his expression hardening. His tone, once controlled, now carried an edge. This wasn't debate anymore, it was attack. People like you, he said, frustration creeping into his voice, are the reason this country is backsliding. You push this fake narrative of victimhood, pretending conservatives are being silenced when, in reality, you're the one silencing everyone else. The studio fell into complete silence. Caroline held his gaze, her posture composed, but there was a sharpness in her eyes. She had handled tough interviews before, but this was different. She let the words settle in the air before responding. Excuse me? Paul didn't backpedal. In fact, he doubled down. You act like free speech is under attack, but what you really want is control. Your people. He stopped himself. But it was too late. The atmosphere in the studio shifted. Producers, who had been watching passively, exchanged nervous glances. Crew members stiffened. And Caroline? She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't even interrupt. She simply asked, "Would you like to clarify what you mean by your people?" The tension in the room was palpable. Paul hesitated, just for a second. But a second was all it took. The cameras were rolling. The internet was watching. Paul Danning was a man who had built his entire career on controlling the conversation, steering it wherever he wanted. But this time, he'd lost the reins. The moment those two words, "your people," left his mouth, something changed. It wasn't just poor phrasing, it was the implication behind it. A phrase that could be dissected, debated, replayed 1,000 times. And Caroline knew it. She leaned back, calmly folding her hands in her lap. The stage was his, to either clarify or sink deeper. Paul inhaled sharply. "I meant conservatives," he said quickly, almost too quickly. "People like you who push an agenda of grievance instead of progress." Caroline tilted her head slightly. "Just to be clear," she said, her tone measured, "when you said your people, you weren't referring to anything beyond political ideology?" Paul's jaw tightened. He had been in this game long enough to know a trap when he saw one. If he pushed back, he risked confirming what everyone was already thinking. If he admitted it was a mistake, he looked weak. So, he changed the subject. "Oh, come on, Caroline. Don't play the victim here," he scoffed, forcing a dry chuckle. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Bad faith outrage. You know exactly what I meant, but instead of debating the issue, you'd rather twist my words and make it about you." Caroline didn't flinch. She wasn't going to let him shift the conversation. "I don't need to twist anything, Paul," she said, her voice steady. "Your words speak for themselves." A flicker of something, irritation, maybe even regret, crossed Paul's face. But he was too deep in it now. He couldn't afford to retreat. So, he made the fatal mistake. You know what? Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing something to society, we wouldn't be having this conversation. There it was. A blanket statement. Delivered with arrogance. Live on air. The silence that followed was suffocating. Not just in the studio, but on the other side of the screen where thousands, soon to be millions, were watching. Even Paul seemed to realize it the second the words left his mouth. His lips parted, as if to soften the blow. But it was too late. Caroline let the words hang for a long moment before responding. "Are you saying conservatives don't contribute to society, Paul?" He exhaled, shifting uncomfortably. "I'm saying this constant whining about being cancelled is exhausting." Caroline nodded slowly. She didn't need to say more. The damage had been done. And within minutes, the clip would explode across the internet. It didn't take long. The second the segment ended, the first clips hit social media. A 15-second snippet of Paul's words. Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing something to society. Spread like wildfire. No context. No prelude. Just that sentence. Within an hour, hashtags were trending. Hashtag Paul Danning, hashtag media bias exposed, hashtag Caroline was right. Some took it at face value, slamming Paul for his arrogance. Others rushed to defend him, calling it a misinterpretation. But the full clip? That only made things worse. Political commentators pounced. Some condemned him. Others framed it as another example of selective outrage. But one thing was clear, the world was watching. And then, the sponsors got involved. By midday, 3 major advertisers had pulled out from the Morning Current, issuing carefully worded statements about reviewing their commitments to the network. By evening, the number had grown to 5. Inside NBS News, the network behind the show, executives were in full-blown crisis mode. The outrage wasn't dying down, it was intensifying. And at 3 p.m., they made their move. Paul Danning has been placed on indefinite suspension while we conduct an internal review of yesterday's broadcast. But the internet had zero patience for half measures. Suspension? Not enough. By the next morning, NBS made its final decision. Effective immediately, Paul Danning is no longer affiliated with NBS News. Paul Danning was finished. But the conversation? It was only just beginning. The debate wasn't over, not even close. In the days that followed, every major media outlet ran think pieces and hosted panel discussions dissecting what had just happened. Was this justice? Or was it censorship? Some argued it was a long overdue reckoning, a message that elite media figures were no longer untouchable. To them, Paul's firing wasn't about free speech, it was about professionalism. Words have weight. And when a journalist crosses a line, they face consequences. Simple as that. But not everyone agreed. Others saw a deeper problem. One that went far beyond Paul Danning. Was he fired for making a mistake? Or erased for holding the wrong opinions? The debate quickly expanded. This wasn't just about one man's downfall anymore. It was about the power of viral outrage, the role social media plays in shaping reality, and the fragile state of public discourse itself. And as for Paul? He might have been out, but he wasn't done. Within a month, he launched his own independent show on YouTube, branding himself as a truth-teller silenced by the establishment. And ironically, his audience was now bigger than ever. Caroline, on the other hand, moved on, but her name would always be tied to this moment. She hadn't just debated a TV host. She had changed the game. So, what does this mean for the rest of us? Was this justice served? Or a dangerous precedent? Did Paul's firing restore accountability? Or did it prove that public pressure controls the media? And more importantly, who gets to decide where the line is? One thing is certain. This won't be the last time something like this happens. And when it does, whose side will you be on? What do you think? Should Paul have been fired? Or was this cancel culture taken too far? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that make you think.